It settled quietly. The silence. Soft and thick like the dust in the corners of rooms no one cleans anymore. It wrapped around everything, especially him. Once, the house echoed with her laughter, my mother's music flowing freely from room to room. But now, it's just him and me. And the silence. He carries the weight like a coat he never takes off, doesn't talk about it, doesn't show it outright. But I see it. I see it in the half-second delay before his smile fully forms, in how he lingers in doorways, as if waiting for something that isn't coming back. There's a hum beneath his stillness, a vibration I can't name, subtle but constant, tugging at me like gravity. It had been a year since she died, a year of learning to breathe without her warmth, to live in a house stripped of its heart. She had been light, the sun itself, kindness, laughter, presence. When she left, she took parts of us with her. We didn't talk about the pain. He didn't speak it, he wore it. Quiet. Heavy. But in that silence, something else began to grow. I don't know when I first noticed it. Maybe it was that night, when the rain came down in sheets and I couldn't sleep. I wandered into the kitchen for tea, and found him there, motionless. Hands braced on the counter, like he was holding the silence in place. He turned when he heard me. Our eyes met. No words at first, just stillness. Couldn't sleep, he asked. You too. He nodded. His voice cracked when he whispered. I missed the sound of her voice at night. I didn't answer. Just poured 2 cups of tea, handed him one. Our fingers brushed, just for a second, but it caught my breath in my chest. He looked down and said, You've grown strong. She'd be proud. I whispered back, So have you. He smiled, not fully, like he was remembering something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. After that, the silence between us began to shift. Not gone, but warmer, fuller. I began doing more around the house, cooking, tending, managing things. He started staying longer in rooms I was in. Our conversations stretched past practicalities. He asked about my dreams, genuinely, as if they mattered to him. Not like a father checking in, but like a man wanting to understand the person I was becoming. One spring evening, I found him outside, watching the wind move through the trees. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him, like he was afraid to let go of something he couldn't name. I asked, Can I sit with you? He nodded, smiled. We sat closer than usual. After a long pause, he said, You remind me of her, but you're not her. You're something else. Stronger, maybe. My chest ached. I didn't know how to respond. So I placed my hand over his and said, You don't have to apologize. And he didn't pull away. From that moment, something began to change. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. Our silence said more than words ever could. He brushed against me more. Shoulder to shoulder, hand to back, fingers lingering longer than necessary. Small touches. But they carried the weight of 1,000 things unspoken. One night, after dinner, he stopped me, placed his hand over mine, and said, Thank you. For staying. For letting me feel something again. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. So I just nodded, and we stood there holding the same dish. Hearts trembling. Later that night, I stood outside his door. I didn't knock. I don't even know why I was there. Maybe I hoped he'd open it. Maybe I hoped he wouldn't. I just stood in the quiet. The next day, something between us had changed again. The air felt charged, but softer. He smiled more. I smiled back. We read together. Shared stories. He told me he used to paint before life made him put it aside. I told him secrets I'd never spoken aloud. Under a blue sky one afternoon, he turned to me and said, I'm not afraid of being alone anymore. Not when you're here. I didn't answer. I just reached for his hand. He laced our fingers together. I used to think love had rules, he whispered. But maybe real love doesn't need them. Is that what this is? I asked. Yes, he said simply. And I believed him. That night he came to my door. Not out of hesitation, but certainty. Not being near each other felt unnatural now. I stepped toward him. He brushed his hand against my cheek. You mean everything, he said. More than I thought I could ever feel again. We didn't cross any lines. We didn't have to. Love doesn't always look like the world expects it to. Sometimes, it lives in quiet gestures, in glances, in held hands and unspoken words. He stayed by my side that night, just holding my hand. We fell asleep like that, fingers entwined. Morning came, soft. I don't want to leave, I whispered. Then don't, he said. And he didn't. The days that followed belonged to us. Quiet, intentional, real. We knew what others might think. But this wasn't rebellion. It wasn't confusion. It was healing. And sometimes, when two broken hearts come together, they don't create a scandal. They create something whole. After that night in the kitchen, something between us shifted. Not suddenly. Not loudly. It was like a tide turning in the dark, unseen, but felt. We didn't speak of it. Of her. Of us. But the silence no longer felt hollow. It was full now, brimming with things we hadn't yet learned how to say. In the mornings, I began waking up before him, making coffee. The smell filled the space where music used to live. He'd shuffle in quietly, eyes still heavy with sleep. But his shoulders sat just a little lower, less burdened. He always paused when he saw me, like he wasn't used to not being alone in the quiet. Then he'd smile. And that smile, still faint, still reluctant, would stay with me all day. He started doing small things, washing the dishes without being asked, fixing the broken hinge on the cabinet, showing up beside me as I folded laundry, as if proximity could replace the words we didn't yet have. One day, I caught him standing in the hallway staring at a photograph of her. He didn't notice me at first. His fingers hovered near the frame, not quite touching. When he spoke, it was barely a whisper. She used to hum in the kitchen. Every time it rained. I never told her how much I loved that. I didn't answer. I stepped beside him, resting my head against his shoulder. We stood like that for a long time, not needing anything else. After that, we began lingering in rooms a little longer. Our conversations stretched beyond the practical. One evening, as I set the table, he asked what I wanted from life. Not in a casual, fatherly way, but like a man who truly wanted to understand who I was becoming. I hesitated. No one had asked me that in so long. I don't know, I said. I used to think I wanted to leave, to start over somewhere far. But lately, I don't feel like I'm missing anything when I'm here. He nodded slowly. There's something peaceful about knowing someone sees you, fully, without trying to fix or change you. There was a long silence. Then he said, "She would have loved the woman you're becoming."
His voice didn't break that time.
It settled between us like a truth we both needed. That night, as we cleared the table, our hands met over a dish, his warm, calloused palm resting lightly on mine. He didn't let go immediately. Instead, he looked at me. "Thank you," he said, eyes glassy, "for staying, for letting me feel again." I forgot what it was like to be known, to be seen. I couldn't speak. My throat burned with unshed words. So I nodded, and we stood like that, connected by something invisible but strong. Later that night, I stood outside his bedroom door. I didn't knock. I didn't even understand why I was there. I told myself I was checking if he was okay. But really, I just needed to feel that quiet again, the one we now shared. I stood there for a while. Long enough to feel foolish. Long enough to wish I had knocked. But then, softly, his voice from the other side. I couldn't sleep either. I pressed my forehead to the door. Neither of us said anything else. That was enough. The next morning, everything was the same. And everything was different. He lingered in the kitchen longer. I brushed his shoulder as I reached for a glass, and this time, he leaned into the touch instead of pulling away. We began reading together in the evenings, sitting side by side on the couch. Sometimes our knees would touch. Sometimes his hand would rest on the cushion, just close enough to mine that our fingers grazed. Little moments, light, fleeting, but charged. I learned things about him I had never known. He had wanted to be a painter, had sketched landscapes in his 20s, dreamed of art school. He stopped when I was born, said life became too practical. I told him about the poetry I used to write, about the notebook I kept hidden in my closet, about the way I used to hear stories in rainstorms. He looked at me, then really looked, and I felt something inside him soften. One afternoon, the sun was beginning to set behind the hills. We sat on the back steps watching the light fall in golden streaks across the yard. "You remind me of her," he said. "But you're not her. You're something else. Stronger, maybe." My heart tightened. I didn't know how to respond. So I reached for his hand. "You don't have to apologize," I whispered. He looked down at our hands, and for the first time, he didn't let go.